Hi, my name is Nicole Faye Golden, and I'm the host of Scar Stories podcast. We all walk through seasons of brokenness, and it's so easy to buy into the lies that we're alone, forgotten, weak, and too far gone. But here's what I want you to know. We all have scars, and so we all have stories. I'm really hoping these interviews resonate with you and that you walk away knowing that you aren't alone, you're never forgotten, you are strong enough, and there are always second chances. Thanks so much for tuning in, and welcome to Scar Stories. Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Scar Stories. My name is Nicole Golden. I'm your host, and we have a very special guest today. I'm so excited. This is Pastor Jud Wilhite from Las Vegas. And when he first signed on, I was telling him, I know it's weird to say I know his wife more than him because I've never met your wife, but just I've been following your wife for probably 10 years now. And if you guys listened to my conversation with Brandy Wilson several months ago, Lori is one of Brandy's best friend, from what I can see. And this is Lori's husband, Jud. Do you get ever introduced as that, Jud? As
Yeah,
Lori's
I like it.
husband?
I receive it. Yes, this is great. I feel like I already have maybe more credibility than I deserve right out of the gate,
I love it. I love it. I love it. So I am so excited to have Jud here. Like I said, he is the lead pastor of Central Online in Las Vegas. And you guys have extension campuses all over, don't you?
Yes, we've got about a dozen campuses
Okay.
around the country. Yeah.
And y'all do some pretty, I just want to stop on this for a second, because if you guys have never checked out Central Online, y'all need to. Y'all do some pretty wild stuff. I mean, it's Vegas. Do you feel the pressure to have to like do some wild stuff because y'all are in Vegas? Or is it like, we just want to do wild stuff because we like doing wild stuff?
It's so funny. It's interesting that I feel like in Vegas, I feel like appropriate pressure to be authentic.
Okay.
I think it's actually like the opposite. Now we do some wild stuff, but for us, what looks wild like isn't wild.
Yeah.
When your church is filled with people that work at Cirque du Soleil and all these places, like you have insane talent everywhere. Like these are just volunteers that jump in and do stuff, and we're usually trying to pull that stuff back.
Okay.
And just try to keep it real. One of the best comments I ever received is just somebody who says like, this is the only real hour in my week.
Wow.
And, so that's what we're really there for. We put some of the spin on it, some of the entertainment kind of crazy factor is there. Yeah. But I think what we're really trying to do is get to conversations like we're about to have that are real and authentic.
Yeah.
Because, that sticks in a city that's built on sort of entertainment and fun, and maybe in some ways, the lie.
Yeah. But how awesome that you guys are able to create a wow experience, but create it in such a way that there is authenticity. I think that's a lost art, especially in churches, because so many churches lean just more towards the wow experience and don't bring the authenticity in. So I love what you guys are doing. Like I said, my husband and I have been following you guys for years. And so big fan. All right, we're going to jump right in. And I sent Jud a lot of these questions. I know the surface answer to some of these. So I'm like so excited to kind of dive in and hear like the real side. So one of the reasons why I wanted to get Jud on here was because I wanted to make sure we had a good male influence on the podcast. I'm a woman, so sometimes I lean all towards women. I'm like, we got to get some male voices on here. And one of the things that I've been curious about for years is you and Lori will both post when you'll post your sobriety coins. You'll talk about going to different recovery groups. I think your main one is Celebrate Recovery. Am I right on that?
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay. And I think you just hit what year are you? Are you 25 years
old?
sober?
Oh gosh, no, I'm like 34, coming up on 34.
Dang, I love it. Okay, 34. So I'm behind.
How can I even be that old? I know. I mean, I cleaned up when I was 3. Yeah.
You should have just been like, yes, 2025, Nicole. That's exactly
perfect.
It.
That's where I'm going now.
Okay. 20 to 25-ish. If you add the ish, you're not lying.
Yeah, there you go.
So tell us a little bit about your story, because I don't know any of the details. I don't know what you're sober from. I just know that you share it. We're going to get to why you share it in a little bit, but tell us a little bit about your story.
Yeah, so I grew up in Amarillo, Texas, mid-sized to smaller Texas town, and just kind of got caught up in running around with a bunch of kids that were older than me, like a lot of us, I don't know, 12, 13 years old. And yeah, I started using drugs first at parties around 12. And, by 13, I was shooting up meth and, doing the whole deal. And just one thing led to another. By 17, I kind of came to the end of myself and just sort of, I came out of an overdose experience and realized like, okay, I'm either going to die or I'm going to go to jail. I'm going to get clean. It's what we all know in recovery, right? You can see where the road's going to end. It's only one of a few places. You're going to die, you're going to jail, you're going to lose your mind.
Yeah.
Or you're going to get clean. You only have 4 options.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. You're like,
and so I walked into a church at 17 for the first time on my own terms. It was the church that my parents took me to growing up, in Texas, and kind of that environment. The church was just part of the culture, part of life. But that was the first time I walked in for myself. And wasn't really sure I believed in the whole like Jesus thing and all of that, but I knew I needed help and I couldn't do it alone, and made my way to a little group of people that they didn't understand anything about recovery. They hadn't been there. They didn't have any framework, and I didn't even tell them all the stuff that I was struggling with, but they walked with me. They encouraged me. I met with them several times a week. Some of them became friends that I would talk to on a daily basis or a regular basis. And I always say the church really saved my life. And so I think for me, I became a pastor because it's really just a microcosm of that story. God rescued my life through those people in the church. And really all I wanted to do the rest of my life, all these years since, is help other people find that same rescue in their life. So
yeah. Did your parents know? Like that was a young age to start getting, involved with all that. Did they have any idea?
I was the 4th kid, and my parents were
tired.
Yes. I mean, I really they were amazing parents, kind, loving, stable. But I do kind of feel like after your 4th kid, I semi-raised myself as I got older. Like I remember when I was 12, my dad's like, "Well, you're an adult now." And I'm just like, well, now I look at my kid, we shelter our kids, right? I have a son who's like 17, and I'm like, yeah, you're not even close, bro. So it's funny. But yeah, I think they knew some things. I think they choose to not know some things. And then I also think they were in that phase of just sort of hands off, getting older, and just kind of, didn't really know what to do with me.
Yeah. And so, you had to have been pretty desperate to go back, like to walk into the church your parents were a part of. Was that, but you said they didn't really know what was going on. So it wouldn't have been as humiliating as if everybody knew what was happening and while you were there.
Yeah, no, like my parents, they both passed on now, but to their dying day they would hear me give my testimony at that church later. Like I shared the whole story with the whole church multiple times over the years, because I became a pastor there years later.
Really?
And so I pastored my home church with my parents. I was on the staff for 6 years, and they would always say, "Oh, it wasn't that bad. We don't remember it being that bad." They would just deny it. Yeah. And then now being in Vegas all these years, I realize like there's just different bottoms for everybody, like different kind of bottom levels. And definitely being in a mid-sized sort of Texas town, I did not get in the kind of trouble I could have gotten into had I been in a city or in Vegas or somewhere like that. It was, my addiction was daily, and it was all consuming. And in that sense, I was addicted to anything and everything that I could get my hands on, or steal, bribe, scratch for, all of that. But it wasn't, I realized it was almost a little bit sheltered by the city and the environment, if that makes sense.
Yeah, 100%. And what about some of the friends that you were doing the drugs with? Did any of them decide to get clean? Like after you said you had like an overdose experience, like did that wake any of them up?
They all but one ended up in jail.
Okay.
So one moved away, and he was always that friend that we all had that could kind of do all this stuff and then not do it.
Yeah.
like, I don't understand these people, man. They're from Mars or something. They have this thing called self-control. Where does
Yeah.
this come from? What is this? You know, like, but he could always just like turn it off. And I'm like, once I'm going, I have no off switch, you know, like,
Yeah,
so,
yeah, yeah. And it's
uh,
interesting, like, were you, because I think sometimes when people think of, I'd share with you ahead of time, my brother had an opioid addiction, and I think a lot of his drug use was, well, he had gotten shingles and doctors had written him prescriptions, and he had a relapse, and then he just kept getting the prescription written. And so initially the addiction started just because it was normal medication, but then he just realized how it made him feel. And I think he struggled a lot with anger, anxiety, depression. And so I think a lot of the drug use was to numb that. So were you attempting to numb anything, or was it just like what you said, small town, friends that were older than you, just intrigued by it? I think I think there's like some myths
yeah.
about why we get addicted to drugs. And sometimes it might just be we're just bored and there's nothing else to do.
Yeah. Well, I think that's part of my answer, but I also think from an early on, I majored in philosophy in graduate school later. I think as a kid, I was asking big questions that nobody asked. And, like just questions, especially that don't live on the surface of American pop culture. I'm
Yep.
like, why are we here? What's the point?
Yeah.
And I can remember sitting, laying in my bed as a young kid being like, if this is it, then,
Mm.
why should I be good? What's the point of being moral? Why should I,
Yeah.
like, I had all
Yeah.
these crazy questions, right, as a kid. And I think I was just trying to figure out, like, what's the point of my life? What is the purpose? If there's no purpose and there's no point, well, then let's just have fun,
Yeah.
let's party like it's 1999. Why
Yeah.
not? Like, this was my mentality.
Yeah.
And I also think I was influenced by older kids.
Yeah.
I was drawn to older kids. It was so cool to be able to like sneak out of my house at 13 years old and climb into, some friends that were in high school and they had a Trans Am,
Yeah.
and like, I'm like, I am so cool right now, like this,
Living the life. Yeah.
living the life. So it was just all of that
Yeah.
mixed together. But I did learn, and that's, I look back, I have an addictive personality,
Mm.
come out in a lot of ways over the years. And so, once I latch onto something, I really go down the rabbit hole.
Yeah.
And even with hobbies, I have a couple of hobbies, things that I like to do, but I'm all in. When I'm
Yeah.
in, I'm all in.
Yeah. Yeah. So the greatest strength is your greatest weakness situation. So
Yeah.
you at 17, you stumble in a church, people start walking with you. So what happens next? You go to seminary, you go into rehab. Like, what are your next steps then?
Yeah, I never went to rehab. I was driving a little red Fiero down the freeway, a little two-door red Fiero on my way to high school. I was about to flunk out of high school, but I was still sort of in it. And I just took all my drugs and threw them out the car window, driving down the freeway. And, somehow, by the grace of God, never looked back. I remember it being just brutally, brutally, brutally hard. And for a long time.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
it was a long time ago, but I just remember every day felt like a war. And there are certain drugs that we can latch onto, and substances that have longer term physical addiction aspect. My thing wasn't really alcohol, it was more meth, which I think is a little more psychological. Cocaine, same story.
Yeah.
Pot, people argue now, where
Yeah.
that even fits on the spectrum, right? But
You're
back
right.
in the day, that was my thing, and all of that stuff. So it was really a mental war for me, like my body wasn't going into any kind of physical withdrawal symptoms or anything like that. Like,
Yeah.
I didn't need to detox in that sense.
Yeah.
But yeah, I just remember it being a daily war and a daily struggle. And it was very lonely because all of my friends, and I think this is typical of a lot of us, all of my friends, that friendship was all about using.
Yeah.
And so, I was, in many ways, it was bizarre. My parents would say later, even though I was a teenager, that they would say, and when I first kind of got cleaned up, I didn't tell anybody. That was the other weird thing. Like, I just was like, I'm doing this or I'm gonna die. Like, those are my choices, not kill myself, die, just like I'm gonna overdose and die. So I have to do, but I'm not going to talk about it because I felt like all my friends had talked about it to everybody, and then they would go right back to using it again. I'm like, and I had done some of that in the past too. And I'm like, okay, I'm not going to talk this time. I'm just going to try to do it one day at a time. You know what I mean? And
Yep.
I feel like those recovery principles served me of like, just today, I'm just one day at a time today, you know, and I'm just going to fight the war today. And I leaned into some friends, but I didn't like find my way to an AA group or an NA group, or, you know, I didn't know any of that stuff. Right. I was just a stupid kid, you know, trying to survive. And all my friends I felt like were still using. And in the past, if I had tried to get clean and I hung around with them, I would always go right back into the whole thing, you know? So I kind of made a break from them.
And then when did you end up graduating high school?
I did. Yeah.
Okay.
It was a cool moment, man. I squeaked by. My assistant principal walked past me on graduation day. I was just sitting there alone in my little cap and gown. I was a nerd and I didn't know anybody.
Yeah.
You know, I wasn't a cool kid.
Yeah.
And she looked at me and she said, Mr. Wilhite, and the most sarcastic edge in her voice, she goes, I never thought I'd see this day. And she walked off. I'll never forget that. I'm like, you know, that she hated me this whole time. I knew it, you know.
Well, and you're probably too like, you and me both, lady. You and me both.
I know. I know. I got to go back and speak at that high school.
Really?
Like decades later that I graduated from, and she was
there?
Still there.
And you're like, mic drop and walk off the stage.
I want to go like, you right there. You were horrible to me. Yeah, no.
You never believed in me. So, okay. So then you graduate high school. What's next? College, seminary? What do we do next?
Well, I moved to Albuquerque, New Mexico, and I played in a rock band. And
okay.
did that for a while, for about 9 months.
Were you not around drugs in the rock band?
It was like a Christian faith-based thing. It was in my senior year, I'd gone to a church camp and I met all these kids and they lived in Albuquerque and they were in this band. And back in the day, for Christian people, there were bands like Striper and you know, all of this. And so we did that, man. It was not good as far as musically.
I love that. Okay. And then after the rock band, what did we do?
So after the rock band, I came back home. I went to college in Dallas, and that was great. And then ended up, really hoping and desiring that I would be able to go down the road of ministry. So I majored in, religion, and then went to seminary in Illinois, which is more like the graduate school, that you go to if ministry is kind of your pathway. And I did that for a little while, and then moved back to Amarillo, my hometown, and got on staff at my home church. And that's where I met Lori, because that's the church she grew up in.
Okay. That's so cool. So in the process of all this, as you're pursuing, ministry, and are you sharing your story at this point? Is it a source of shame for you? Is it a source of like drive? Like what happens with your story as you're pursuing all this?
I would say in the earlier years, it was more of a source of shame than anything, and I just buried it.
Yeah. I
don't know what you as you talk to so many people wrestling with or coming out of different things, and I know for me it was a long time ago, but I really just buried it. And it was a traumatic thing that I didn't want to remember. I was afraid people would judge me.
Yep.
Yep. But I would say by the end of, I would say by the time I was maybe around 8 to 10 years clean, 7 to 10 years clean, somewhere in there, I just started to tell that story a lot more. And part of my dynamic was I was home. I was among all these people that I had known my whole life. Some of them knew a little bit.
Yeah.
Some of them didn't know fully.
Yeah.
And but I got more comfortable letting that story be a testimony to God's grace. And stopped worrying so much. My primal question, I don't know, like the question underneath all the questions in my life.
Yeah.
My buddy Mike Foster has this great paradigm framework. He says, everybody has like a primal question underneath our lives that drives so much of our decisions. So much of it comes from trauma in childhood, or brokenness in our life. And so mine coming out of addiction, and a lot of us coming out of addiction, I think, is simply, am I worthy?
Wow.
You know,
Yeah.
am I worthy? And so the quest of my life for decades has been to prove to, I don't know who, really,
Yeah.
you know, like,
Yeah.
that I am worthy of
Mm.
love. I am worthy of acceptance. I am worthy of all these things that, as a person of faith, I realize God actually gives me freely, and I already have.
Yep.
But
Yep.
that question drives so much of it. So in my early years in recovery, it was all about achievement. You know,
Mm.
it was all about checking all the boxes that I felt like would show my parents, you know, that I was not a failure,
Yeah.
would show people around me. I always felt like I should never have been a pastor. I still kind of have
Hmm.
this thing in me, like, how did I get here? You know, why
Yeah.
am
Yeah.
I the one doing this? You know,
Yeah.
I'm a goob. How am I doing this? You know, like, it's my whole life. And you know, so much of that I tried to bury early on before, and then it was a process of getting more open and more transparent, realizing that I always say to my wife Lori, you know, authenticity is our superpower.
Mm.
You know,
Yep.
and as you get more real,
Yep.
your influence actually grows. You
Yep.
know.
Yep. No, that's 100%. It's funny, this question, am I, I mean, I think that's the primal question for almost every human being, I would say. I think we all are trying to prove our worth because I think we all understand the depth of our brokenness, right? And I mean, maybe some of us more than others, but it's interesting because my husband and I, when we got married, okay, this is bad. I think 11 or 12 years ago. Honestly, I've lost track because this
Oh
past 2 years,
my
I
gosh!
know I've already
Whoa!
lost
Stop
track.
the tape. I love it. That's so good.
I've
I'm
already
gonna make.
lost track.
Hey, I need his contact. I'm gonna make sure he sees this, and it lets him off the hook, right? For any
Listen,
time he gets it wrong.
okay, we were married in 2010, so it's been 11 years. I got it. I got it. You can't hold
Yeah.
that against me. 2019 to 2021 has been a
Good.
black hole of craziness, so I've
Yes.
literally lost track. But
Yes.
we got married 10 years ago. Literally, my mental emotional breakdown happens right afterwards. And so, for about, I would say 6 to 8 years was just us trying to figure out, okay, how do we do this? How do we stay married, have a family, pastor church with, I have anxiety, depression, and borderline personality disorder with these three different, things going on. And so then about 2 years ago, about 3 months before my brother took his life, I preached for the very first time at our church and shared my story from start to finish. And it was wild, the visceral response, or visceral, however you say that word, visceral response of people as they're walking out the doors, like almost like I gave them permission to be themselves and to actually own their brokenness. And I think, especially, as you and I are talking as pastors and people in spiritual leadership, the importance of sharing our stories and of letting people get a glimpse into our brokenness, be like, we are all broken, even us, we can relate. And I think there's some kind of power and connection, and Jesus uses that in crazy ways.
Yes. I write anytime I'm stuck on a message, or I'm working on a talk and it doesn't feel right, you know, like
Yeah.
it's not there. I write at the top of the talk, authenticity is my
Mm,
superpower.
mm,
And I
mm.
go back through it with the filter of, how can I just be honest? It doesn't have to be great. Make
Yeah.
it honest.
Yeah.
And it becomes great
Yep.
because it's honest. You know what I mean?
That's the thing. Yeah. I mean, that's the funny thing is Brian and I both found, my husband Brian and I, as we've, preached. I mean, he preaches way more. I preach like 3 or 4 times a year. I like it, but I don't really like it. Like, I don't like the grueling nature of it. So I'm like, name me as a teaching pastor and I'll fill in here and there. You do all the grunt work.
Yeah.
I can't. It's too much.
Oh my gosh. Lori and I just taught this weekend, and we actually like it when we're doing it, but we fight the whole time we're getting ready. I
Oh,
mean, it's always just like,
100%.
it's like this tug of war of like, I'm trying to steer her, she's trying to steer me. It's like, okay, we
Yeah.
cannot do this very often.
2 years ago, we did a series, Relationship Goals. It was a 6-week series, and we almost got divorced halfway through, trying to teach.
Yes.
So it was great.
Yes.
No, you get it. No, but you know, sometimes it's the times you go up and you're like, I have a perfectly polished message, and you get up there and deliver it, doesn't land. Then other times you go up there, you throw away your notes and you're just speaking from, okay, this is what Jesus put on my heart. And it's like people respond because yeah, it's authenticity. So you never got a part of Celebrate Recovery. How long ago did you start in Celebrate Recovery then? Because that wasn't something you initially did. So that's something you must
Yeah.
have chosen to do years after being clean. So when and why did you get into Celebrate Recovery?
Yeah, so that would have been in California about 20 years ago when
Okay.
that was the first time I was exposed to Celebrate Recovery. We
Okay.
lived in Southern California, and it's the first time I sort of saw what Celebrate Recovery was and did. And I love, I love that Celebrate Recovery used the 12 steps because
Hmm.
there's I don't know, a baseline, cultural baseline and an understanding in the recovery community of like what that is.
Yeah.
So it was an easy like front door to people who had kind of been around all of that to step into it. And yeah, no, I just I got involved and just got moved by seeing all of the stories. And I think I'm just always aware that how much people meant to me in that season and how key like that transition season was for me.
Hmm.
Just it saved my life,
Yeah.
so I'm
Yeah.
so I love it. I champion it. And then when we moved out to Las Vegas 18 years ago, um it was one of the first things that I did,
Hmm.
start a Celebrate Recovery.
Did
And
you lead it?
no, we had a staff
Okay.
member lead it.
Okay.
And I actually I'm involved in the sense that I champion it.
Yeah.
And I'm there once or twice a year. I'll share my testimony,
Yep.
and Lori and I will go in and do it together sometimes. I like to go in and for what they call chip night,
Yep.
once a month when people get their chips. I like to be there for that when I can. But they always announce it when I'm going to be there.
Okay.
And they always kind of let everybody know
Yeah.
more from an anonymity standpoint.
Yeah.
If you don't
Yeah.
kind of want the pastor guy like seeing you at Celebrate Recovery. So I don't go every week. We try to let people, although I don't
Yeah.
think anybody cares. I think
Yeah.
they've heard me so many times. They're like, oh
Yeah.
man, we're all just messed up. It's okay.
Yeah.
So
They just like, yeah, I love that. And I love that you've created an atmosphere where there's not the shame around it, because I think that is specifically with addiction. And I want to ask you this. I do think we're all asking the question, am I worthy? But why do you think so much because I'm thinking back to my brother, and I really see that as being something he struggled with with his worthiness. Why do you think with addiction, there is that such a sense of worthlessness? Like what is it?
yeah,
Is it because it's
well, I
like,
definitely think there's just a sense that we failed so much.
yeah,
There is no there is no liar like an addict lying to themselves. Right?
yeah,
Like how many times do we tell ourselves, I'm going to get clean. This is the last time I'm going to do it. I'm
yeah,
never going to do that again. I'm never going to, like that's all traumatic deep
yeah.
down. And while I do think that is a primal question for everybody, I have a friend who went through as a kid sexual abuse, and like his
Mm,
primal question is, am I safe?
mm,
It's the question he asks when he balances his finances.
yeah,
He deals with conflict.
yeah,
He's not even aware that it's underneath everything in his
yeah,
life. Am I safe? My wife would say she doesn't come from, addiction in that sense. She would say like her kind of, it's a slight variation. Like the question underneath everything for her is always, am I enough? Or really, am I good enough? Am I a good enough wife? Am I a good enough worker? Am I a good enough employee? Am I good enough,
yeah,
fill in the blank? And that sort of is the question underneath so much of what she does. So I do think they're all kind of similar, but they might have slight variations,
yep,
based on the trauma we've been through
yep,
and the things we've been through. But I definitely feel like for addiction, you lie to yourself so much, you lie to others. I stole from everybody I could, you lie so much you can't even hardly, the lie and the truth are all one big thing. Like it's all
yeah,
just a mess, right?
yeah,
And I do think when you come out of that and then you realize how much you've hurt people,
hmm,
uh, how much you've disappointed them, real or imagined,
yeah,
then you
yeah,
carry that.
yeah,
And I think for me, like my parents would downplay it and I upplayed it.
yeah,
So
yeah. Well, and it's so interesting you said, because I remember my brother and I had two conversations before he died. One was a really good conversation. I could tell he was clean. I could always tell when he was clean and when he was not.
Yeah.
There was a totally different personality, depending on what he was on and using. But I remember one of the last major conversations we had, he had called and he was trying to make amends, but I could tell he had been on something, because he was very cocky in the way he was trying. It's like, hey, I'm just sorry for everything. Will you forgive me? And I'm like, oh, well, sure, but like, no, like you put us through
Right.
hell, like I want to be
Yeah.
forgiving, but like, come on. And so, but one of the things he had said was, he was like, I have a journal right now that I'm keeping where I'm writing down everything I'm saying. Because he's like, I've gotten addicted to lying. He's like, I've replaced the pills with lying, and I just lie all the time. I don't even know I'm lying.
That's right.
And I know that did weigh on him. I think sometimes the cockiness and the arrogance and the flippancy was his mask of it wasn't bothering him. But did you carry a lot of guilt after you got clean over the lies and all those things? And how did you process and deal with that guilt after you were getting clean?
Yeah. Well, I carried it and I still carry it, like
Mm, mm,
it's still in me all 30 something years later,
wow.
like
Yeah.
it's because I think when you crack, you it doesn't matter, like you can heal, but the scar, it's your podcast, right?
Yep.
It's scars, it's stories, but when you're really broken, it never heals like it never happened.
Yeah.
It heals, but it still hurts, the scar
Yep.
is still there, right?
Yep.
um and I think for me, I was definitely a broken person when i
Mm,
when i finally sobered up.
yeah.
And so I sort of transferred everything into uh trying to achieve and
Mhm.
trying to make up for lost time.
Yeah.
When I did go to college, I was crazy. People didn't even know what to make of me. I was 19 and in college, 18 and in college, whatever, and they would all go out and party,
Yeah.
and they'd be like, "Come on, man," like in the dorm and stuff. And I'm like, "No, man, I'm going to the library."
Yeah.
And they would look at me like, "What?" And I didn't really tell people, but it's a whole different story. I won't go into all of it, but I slid into college. I kind of lied about the SAT, like, oh yeah, I'm going to take it. I'm going to tell, like, I never really took it. And I wrote my first English paper, and it was 2 pages, no paragraphs.
Oh my.
And I remember the professor came over to me, like in college, right? And
Yeah.
she puts this paper down on my desk, and this is what she said to me. She goes, "What happened to you?" And
Yeah.
I'm like, I didn't know what to say.
Yeah.
So I would go to the library and, like, I literally read cover to cover English textbooks, because I felt like I have to teach myself how to write.
Yeah.
I have to teach myself basic math. I had to teach myself how to type. I had to, like I just didn't know anything, right?
That is
So I
crazy.
threw myself into all this stuff to try and catch up and make
Yeah.
up for all those years. And
Yeah.
they just came out in everything. And so I struggled a lot in my early days in school, but after you make it through a year, you don't have to take the SAT.
Yeah.
Grades are kind of enough, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Small
Yeah.
college, like not talking about some Ivy League school or anything, so
Yeah.
they
Yeah.
kind of left me in. And I remember after that, I only got one B.
Wow.
And I remember sitting on this bench outside and weeping
Hmm.
because I felt like I was a disappointment to my dad.
Wow. Wow.
He didn't even care.
Wow.
This was all
Yeah.
about my brokenness, trying to overcompensate from my
Yeah.
years of addiction. And so anyway, yeah.
Do you catch yourself still, 30 plus years later, trying to overcompensate, prove those things? What, like, is that because I know, you know, I've been in the ministry long enough and been around enough pastors and spiritual leaders to know that's always been a thing where it's trying to prove the numbers, the
Yes.
accolades, the book deals, the speaking gigs,
Yes.
and you would never say this about yourself, but me, like, you're big time. Like, Jud and Lori Wilhite, you guys are, I know it's fun, but you guys have had a huge influence on hundreds of thousands of people. I mean, you guys have both written books. I've read them. I love hearing you guys. I love seeing what you guys are doing. And so is it easy for you to kind of fall back in that way of thinking of having to make up for those years and having to continue to prove like I'm worthy, I'm worthy?
Yeah. Well, I think for a long time it was, and I think it's still kind of in there in me, but I do think maybe about 10 years ago, it finally shifted for me, like some of that, I finally let go of some of that. And here's what's fascinating. It was really when my parents both passed away.
Wow.
And so I don't know what to do with this from a peer counselor. Okay. Once I love my parents, they're amazing, but
Yeah.
it was almost like I had nothing left to prove.
Huh.
There was no one left to see what I had done. You know how you do something great, even if you have a totally dysfunctional family,
Yeah.
you want your parents to see what you did.
Yes.
You know what I mean? You just want
Yes.
somebody to be like, yeah, you did that,
Yeah. Yeah.
I feel like when that was not there, it kind of changed the dynamic, and it in a healthy way for me.
Yeah.
Because whatever that was, they didn't put that on me. Whatever I kind of put on them,
Yeah.
that drove that, sort of like kind of went away. So
that's wild. I mean, and that if that doesn't show you the power, like what you said, even if you have a completely dysfunctional family, like we have 4 kids, so I get the whole exhaustion thing. And my 4th kid's raising himself too. He's 2, but he's raising himself. And so I kind of like it is what it is. But I'm like, dang, like the power of us as parents, of our words, of our interactions with our kids, like, dang, if that doesn't like, wake you up. Yeah.
Yeah.
Jeez.
Yeah,
So
no, that's real.
We'll land here in our last few minutes together, but you have 2 kids. So has there been fear that your addictive personality is gonna get past them by? Okay.
Oh my gosh. Lori would say, this is the thing Lori said to me, our whole family life, our whole marriage.
Yeah.
She'll stop me and she'll say, Jud, you're parenting out of fear right now.
Yep. Wow.
My philosophy was, if I can get, and I don't know that I would state it this way, but this is really kind of true. Like if I could raise my kids and they would be sober, I won. Like that's victory. And Lori's like, no, that's not victory. I mean, she's like, that's a fear-based parenting model that just says, I want to keep my kids out of fill in the blank because I don't want them to become like me. And so Lori would always say, we do not parent out of fear, we parent out of faith. And she would totally led our family in this, including me.
Yeah.
We have 3, she has 3 kids. I'm one of them, like the other 2 kids and me, and we all sit there and be like, okay, all right. But, she was like, look, we want to help our kids discover their purpose. We want to look and discover, like, what are the gifts that God has given them? And we want to point them in that direction and have some faith and not just live in fear. But no, I was the first time my kids, start listening to music with very questionable lyrics, I'm freaking out, right? That I don't care about that kind of, that I love all kinds of music, but everything went back to my years in the mess that I was. So I was a little crazy, and Lori was always.
You're like DC Talk and Sandy Patty only.
Yes, that's right. I mean, they're they know all the lyrics to these songs, and they come on the radio. We would listen. Back then, when I was dropping our kids off at school and all that, they would want to listen to certain radio stations, programs, and just all the top music, and it's always great for me because that's how I could keep up. Wow, holy cow, right? Stuff that if it was just me in the car, I'd be like, oh yeah, that's a great song. But when your like 13-year-old daughter is singing it, you're like, all right, stop the freaking car right now. We're gonna talk,
Yes, they have these TikTok trends right now. I love TikTok. I have fallen down I'm in my 30s and can't get enough of it. But they have this trend now where it's like you listen to the music you used to sing to and think we're fine back then, and now you listen to it now and you're hearing the words and you're like, what the heck was I singing and saying?
Hey, the other thing is like the Backyardigans, all the soundtrack of the Backyardigans, like they're playing it in our student camps. And I'm driving my daughter to college in California a few weeks ago, And yeah, she puts the Backyardigans soundtrack on. I'm like, you've got to be kidding me. I raised you watching this stuff. You know, like it just trips me out, right?
This is
So we're
not
singing
okay.
like Castaways. You know, I'm like, this is a moment.
I love it. I love it. How old were your kids when you told them your story?
They were young,
Really?
really young. Yeah, because
Why?
they just grew up in the church, and I talk about it a lot in
Okay.
the church. So when I came to Vegas 18 years ago as a pastor, I started talking about my story probably every 2 to 4 months
Okay.
on the platform, full on, kind of unpacking it again and again and again. It was helping shape the culture of
Yep.
the church.
Yep.
We're in one of the addiction hotspots in America.
Hmm.
Um, we, in short order, had one of the larger Celebrate recoveries in the nation.
Mm.
You know, like back then, it was just blowing up.
Yeah.
And whether it's like gambling addiction or
Mm.
drugs and alcohol or just codependency kind of issues, a lot of brokenness, of course, a lot of domestic abuse.
Yep.
All of this kind of stuff is really high statistically in Vegas. And if you talk to pretty much any pastor, religious leader in the town, Jewish, Christian, Orthodox, Catholic, they would all tell you the number one issue is drug addiction.
Wow. Wow.
So that's a huge thing. But is that really any different
Nope.
than your area or any
Yeah.
area
Yeah.
anymore?
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
I found it in Amarillo, Texas. I could get whatever I wanted.
Yeah. It's
So
everywhere, man. I mean, that's the thing. It's funny because a lot of people ask us, I haven't told them how, their Uncle Eric died. They just know he died. They know he wasn't happy. He wasn't doing well. I talk about my mental illness a lot with them, especially with my daughter. She's 9. She's my oldest. I've got a 9, 7, 5, and 2-year-old. We're done because we're crazy. And I was like, we're done. So that's it. But I do think there is I think our kids need to know stuff. I think give them as much information as they can process at their age, right? You don't want to give them too much. That's why I was like, I'm waiting on the whole suicide topic. That's a lot for them to
yeah,
try to wrap
that's
their
right.
mind around right now. But they're around a lot of stuff at our church too. We call ourselves the alternative to church as usual. We're kind of we're part of North Point Network. We
Yeah.
just joined with them about a year or two ago. But when we started the church, we had maybe like 20, 25 people, and we've grown substantially over the past several years. And we kind of get all the misfits. Anyone, we're in Florida, so it's similar to Texas. Everyone's a Christian, everybody goes to church, all those things. But we're getting a lot of the people that have gotten kicked out of church, have left church because they had too many questions.
Right.
They're coming to our church for answers. And we've been known recently as the mental health church because we talk about it so openly from the stage, just kind of like
What a great thing, especially in this season.
Yes. Yeah. And it's been overwhelming because now more and more what we're seeing in the mental health trends is teenagers are falling apart at the seams and parents are just, unsure as to what to do. So we're dealing with a lot of mental health stuff with students and things like that. But just kind of letting our children see, like letting them into some of the stuff as much as they can process, and then shining that up against the light of the hope of grace of Jesus, I think is really cool for them to see. So,
well, especially as they get old enough to remember, I think that's something that it can be discouraging, but I think everything we do like shapes our kids' lives, and we should act like they can always remember. But the reality is somewhere around most kids, I don't know, 10, 11, 12 and down, they won't be able to remember much.
Yeah.
Specifically, they have moments, but as they start getting in those formative years that they'll be able to remember.
Yep.
Like one of the things that we would do with our kids, with our daughter, is we took her to Celebrate Recovery, and to like a chip night.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so see the joy, see people getting these recovery chips,
I love
just to
that.
like the big gathering, like,
yeah.
because Lori's grandfather was an alcoholic, and AA had saved his life. He didn't really celebrate his birthday. He celebrated his AA birthday.
Wow.
And so every year on his AA birthday, he would bring her with him to the AA meeting.
Yeah.
And she would sit and listen to all these people and their stories, small, in the circle.
Yeah.
And they would celebrate his AA birthday. But that marked her. Like she never forgot it. She never went down the road of like drugs and alcohol. She never, because every year she had celebrated and heard all these stories with her grandfather of like, okay, this can ruin your life,
Yeah.
and so we try to do that, right, to involve them and
Yeah.
just get
Yeah.
them to celebrate recovery or AA or something, get them to a meeting to see and hear the stories of like,
Mm.
what not only what can happen, but how beautiful redemption can
Yeah,
be.
I was just about to say that. Yeah. Yeah. I think sometimes it's especially like Jesus followers who are parents, like we can focus too much, like we parenting out of the fear. Look what can happen. Look what, but I think there's something beautiful about being, no, look what Jesus does, look
Right.
what he does with our stories. So, Judd, thank you so much. Like, I really appreciate your time and
Oh,
sharing your story. And I would love it if those of you who are listening would subscribe to Scar Stories Podcast. You can find out where any podcast catchers are. You can watch me on YouTube. Check out my website, NicoleGolden.org, for more resources. I'll make sure to link some of Judd's books there here shortly. But thanks again, Judd, and I hope you
thank
all have a
you.
great day.
I appreciate it.
Thank you so much for tuning in to Scar Stories Podcast. We all need places where we can feel seen, be safe, find connection and resources. I would love to connect with you on social media at Nicole Faye Golden. I also have a website with a ton of resources and a free 7-day Praying Scared prayer journal at NicoleGolden.org. Thank you for tuning in. I'd love it if you shared this with your friends and if you left a rating and a comment. And I look forward to seeing you next time as we delve into mental health, parenting, family, and so many other issues with a lot of my friends. We'll see you soon.